My name is Angela, and I've always been the type to avoid office mixers like the plague. But tonight, as I stood in the corner of our company's dimly lit bar, nursing a gin and tonic I didn't want, I had no idea my life was about to change forever. "You're not like the others," a deep voice said beside me. I turned to see a tall, muscular man with piercing blue eyes. "And that makes you dangerous." I raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" He grinned, extending his hand. "I'm Wesley, and I mean it as a compliment. Everyone else here is busy schmoozing and climbing the corporate ladder. You look like you'd rather be anywhere else." I shook his hand, surprised by the warmth of his grip. "Angela, and you're not wrong. I'm only here because my boss made it mandatory." Wesley leaned against the bar, his eyes never leaving mine. "So, Angela, what would you rather be doing on a Friday night?" "Honestly, I'd be at the gym, then curled up with a good book." His eyes lit up. "A woman after my own heart. Former rugby player here. What's your poison? Weights or cardio?" For the next hour, Wesley and I talked about everything from our favorite workout routines to our career aspirations. It was refreshing to have a conversation that didn't revolve around office politics or the latest reality TV drama. "So, why'd you quit rugby?" I asked, genuinely curious. Wesley's smile faltered for a moment. "Injury. Tore my ACL. My sister nursed me back to health, but by then, my shot at the pros was gone." "I'm sorry," I said, noticing the flash of pain in his eyes. "That must have been tough." He shrugged. "It was. But it led me here, so I can't complain too much." As the night wore on, I found myself drawn to Wesley's easy charm and genuine interest in what I had to say. It had been a long time since I'd felt this kind of connection with someone. "Listen," Wesley said as the crowd began to thin. "I know this might be forward, but would you like to grab coffee sometime? Outside of this stuffy work environment." I hesitated. My last relationship had ended badly, and I'd sworn off dating for a while. But something about Wesley felt different. "I'd like that," I heard myself say. Wesley's face lit up. "Great. How about tomorrow morning? There's this little cafe on 5th that does amazing avocado toast." As we exchanged numbers, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into something bigger than just a coffee date. Wesley's earlier words echoed in my mind. "You're not like the others. And that makes you dangerous." Little did I know just how dangerous I would become, not just to Wesley's heart, but to the carefully constructed world his family had built around him. The next morning, I stood outside the cafe, debating whether to go in or turn tail and run. My phone buzzed with a text from Wesley. "Hope you're still coming. I promise I don't bite. Unless you're into that sort of thing." Winky face. I laughed despite myself and pushed open the door. Wesley was already there, 2 steaming mugs on the table in front of him. "I took a chance and ordered you a latte," he said as I sat down. "Hope that's okay." I took a sip, pleasantly surprised. "Perfect, actually. How'd you guess?" He winked. "I have a sixth sense about these things." As we talked, I found myself opening up more than I had in years. Wesley listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and sharing his own experiences. "You know," he said as we finished our coffee, "I have to admit something. I saw you at the office a few weeks ago and have been trying to work up the courage to talk to you ever since." I felt a blush creep up my cheeks. "Really? Why didn't you say anything sooner?" Wesley's eyes grew serious. "I've had some complicated relationships in the past. I wanted to make sure I was ready before jumping into anything new." There was something in his tone that made me wonder what he wasn't saying, but I pushed the thought aside. For the first time in a long time, I was excited about the possibility of a new relationship. As we left the cafe, Wesley caught my hand. "Angela, I know this might be too soon, but I'd really like to see you again." I squeezed his hand, ignoring the warning bells in the back of my mind. "I like that too, Wesley." Little did I know, that simple decision would set in motion a chain of events that would test my strength, my love, and my very sanity in ways I could never have imagined. The weeks following our first coffee date flew by in a whirlwind of shared laughter, intense workouts, and late-night conversations. Wesley and I fell into an easy rhythm, our connection deepening with each passing day. "I can't believe how natural this feels," I said one evening as we strolled through the park, our fingers intertwined. Wesley squeezed my hand. "I know what you mean. It's like I've known you forever." But as our relationship blossomed, I couldn't shake the feeling that Wesley was holding something back. Whenever the topic of his family came up, a shadow would cross his face. "Tell me about your sister," I prodded gently one night over dinner. "You mentioned she raised you?" Wesley's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Vivian? She's intense. After our mom died, she took on the role of both sister and mother. We're close, but it's complicated." I sensed there was more to the story, but I didn't push. Instead, I changed the subject. "Speaking of family, my parents are dying to meet you. How about dinner at their place this weekend?" Relief flooded Wesley's face. "I'd love that." Saturday evening found us on my parents' doorstep, a bottle of wine in Wesley's hand. My mother flung open the door before we could knock. "Angela, darling." She enveloped me in a hug before turning to Wesley. "And you must be the young man we've heard so much about." My father appeared behind her, extending his hand.
"Come in, come in."
"I hope you like lasagna, Wesley. It's Angela's favorite." As we settled around the dining table, I watched with growing warmth as Wesley charmed my parents. He complimented my mother's cooking, discussed rugby with my father, and even offered to help with the dishes. "So, Wesley," my father said as we lingered over dessert, "Angela tells us you work in finance?" Wesley nodded. "Yes, sir. I started as an intern right out of college and worked my way up." "Impressive," my mother chimed in. "And your family? Are they in the area?" I felt Wesley tense beside me. "It's just my sister and me. Our parents passed away when I was young." My mother's face softened. "Oh, I'm so sorry, dear. That must have been difficult." Wesley managed a small smile. "It was, but Vivian stepped up. She's been my rock." As we said our goodbyes later that evening, my parents pulled me aside. "He's a keeper, Angela," my mother whispered. "Don't let this one go." In the car ride home, Wesley was uncharacteristically quiet. "Everything okay?" I asked, reaching for his hand. He nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on the road. "Your parents are great. It's just being there, seeing that kind of normal family dynamic. It made me realize how different my upbringing was." I squeezed his hand. "Wesley, you can talk to me about it, you know. I want to understand." He sighed heavily. "It's not easy to explain, Vivian. She's more than just a sister to me. She's been my whole world for so long. Sometimes I wonder if I even know who I am without her influence." A chill ran down my spine at his words, but I pushed the feeling aside. "Maybe it's time I met her," I suggested. "If she's such an important part of your life, I want to know her too." Wesley's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Yeah, maybe. I'll talk to her about setting something up." As we pulled up to my apartment, Wesley turned to me, his eyes intense. "Angela, I need you to know something. What we have, it's special. I've never felt this way about anyone before. But my relationship with Vivian, it's complicated. I just hope you can be patient with me as I figure it all out." I leaned in, kissing him softly. "We'll figure out together, I promised." Little did I know, those words would be put to the test sooner than I could have imagined. As I watched Wesley drive away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of something much bigger and more complex than I had bargained for. But for Wesley, I was willing to take the leap. The day of the family dinner arrived, and my stomach was in knots as Wesley and I pulled up to Vivian's house. It was a stately Victorian, impeccably maintained, with a manicured lawn that screamed perfection. "Ready?" Wesley asked, squeezing my hand. I nodded, forcing a smile. "As I'll ever be." The front door swung open before we reached it, revealing a striking woman with Wesley's piercing blue eyes. "Little brother," she exclaimed, pulling Wesley into a tight embrace. Over his shoulder, her gaze locked onto mine, assessing. "You must be Angela," Vivian said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "We've heard so much about you." As we stepped inside, a tall, handsome man appeared from the kitchen. "I'm Sterling," he introduced himself, his charm palpable. "Vivian's better half." The house was immaculate, every surface gleaming. Family photos adorned the walls, most featuring Wesley and Vivian. I noticed the absence of their parents in any recent pictures. "Dinner's almost ready," Vivian announced. "Wesley, why don't you give Angela the tour?" As Wesley led me through the house, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every room seemed to hold a piece of Wesley's past, carefully curated by Vivian. "And this is my old room," Wesley said, pushing open a door. It was like stepping into a time capsule. Trophies lined the shelves, and posters of rugby stars covered the walls. "Vivian's kept it exactly the same," he explained, a hint of discomfort in his voice. Back in the dining room, Vivian was laying out an impressive spread. "I hope you like roast chicken, Angela. It's Wesley's favorite. It looks delicious," I said, taking my seat. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Vivian waved me off. "No need. I know exactly how Wesley likes things." Throughout dinner, Vivian peppered me with questions about my job, my family, and my relationship with Wesley. Each answer seemed to be met with a subtle look of disapproval. "So, Angela," Vivian said, refilling my wine glass, "Wesley mentioned you have some food allergies. I hope I haven't included anything problematic." "Oh, it's just shellfish," I replied. "I'm fine with everything else." Vivian's eyes glinted. "Good to know. We wouldn't want any accidents." As dessert was served, a decadent chocolate cake, Sterling regaled us with stories from his bar. I noticed how he kept touching Vivian's arm, how she leaned into him. Yet her eyes rarely left Wesley. "Remember when you used to help out at the bar, Wes?" Sterling asked. "The ladies loved having you behind the counter." Wesley shifted uncomfortably. "That was a long time ago." "Oh, but you were so good at it," Vivian chimed in.
Oh, visst ett charme.
I felt a prickle of unease. There was an undercurrent to their words I couldn't quite grasp. As we were finishing our cake, I suddenly felt a tickle in my throat. Within moments, it became difficult to breathe. "Angela?" Wesley's voice was panicked. "What's wrong?" I tried to speak, but my throat was closing up. My vision blurred as I saw Vivian standing over me, her expression unreadable. "Oh dear," she said, her voice distant. "Could there have been shellfish in the sauce?" I was so careful. The next few minutes were a blur of activity. Wesley calling an ambulance, Sterling fetching my EpiPen from my purse, Vivian hovering nearby with a look of concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. As the paramedics loaded me into the ambulance, I caught a glimpse of Vivian comforting a distraught Wesley. "Don't worry," I heard her say. "I'll take care of everything." In the hospital, as the medication took effect and my breathing eased, I replayed the evening in my mind. The careful questions, the loaded glances, the accidental exposure to my allergen. A chilling thought crept in. Had Vivian done this on purpose? As I drifted off to sleep, one thing became clear. My relationship with Wesley was no longer just about us. I was up against a force I hadn't anticipated, a sister whose love for her brother bordered on obsession, and who might go to any lengths to keep him close. The weeks following the disastrous dinner at Vivian's house were tense. Wesley was torn between concern for me and loyalty to his sister, while I grappled with my growing suspicions about Vivian's true nature. "I'm sure it was just an accident," Wesley insisted for the 100th time as we prepared for another visit to his sister's house. "Vivian feels terrible about what happened." I bit my tongue, choosing my words carefully. "I know, but don't you think it's odd that she'd use shellfish in a sauce without mentioning it?" Wesley's jaw tightened. "She's not perfect, Angela, but she'd never intentionally hurt you." I let the subject drop, but as we pulled up to Vivian's immaculate Victorian, dread pooled in my stomach. Vivian greeted us at the door, all smiles and apologies. "Angela, dear, I'm so glad you're feeling better. I've been beside myself with worry." Her words rang hollow, but I forced a smile. "Thank you, Vivian. I'm fine now." As we settled in the living room, Sterling appeared with a tray of drinks. "Special mocktails for everyone," he announced with a wink. "No allergic reactions tonight, I promise." I sipped the fruity concoction cautiously, hyper-aware of every taste and sensation. Dinner proceeded without incident, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, analyzed, judged. It wasn't until dessert that things took a turn. As I bit into the homemade apple pie, a familiar tingling sensation started in my throat. "Is everything all right, Angela?" Vivian asked, her eyes sharp despite her concerned tone. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. But within minutes, my throat began to close, and panic set in. "Wesley," I gasped, fumbling for my purse and the EpiPen inside. Chaos erupted. Wesley shouting for an ambulance, Sterling rushing to find antihistamines, and Vivian hovering nearby, her expression a mask of concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. As the paramedics loaded me into the ambulance for the second time in as many months, I caught a glimpse of Vivian comforting Wesley. "Don't worry, little brother," she cooed. "I'll take care of everything." The hospital visit was mercifully short this time, but it left me shaken and more suspicious than ever. Back at my apartment, Wesley paced anxiously. "I don't understand," he muttered. "Vivian swears there was nothing in that pie that could have triggered your allergy." I took a deep breath, knowing my next words could change everything. "Wesley, I think Vivian might be doing this on purpose." He froze, his face a mix of shock and disbelief.
What?
"That's insane, Angela. Why would she do that?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But think about it. 2 severe allergic reactions, both at her house, both after she assured me the food was safe. It's too much of a coincidence." Wesley's face hardened. "You're wrong. Vivian would never."
She loves me.
"She wants me to be happy." "Does she?" I challenged. "Or does she want you to need her?" The argument that followed was brutal. Wesley stormed out, leaving me alone with my fears and suspicions. Over the next few days, I threw myself into research, documenting every interaction with Vivian, every coincidence that had occurred since Wesley and I started dating. A pattern emerged, one of subtle manipulation and calculated moves designed to keep Wesley close and push others away. When Wesley finally returned, his eyes were red-rimmed and conflicted. "I talked to some of my exes," he said quietly. They had similar experiences with Vivian. Accidents, misunderstandings, always when things were getting serious between us. My heart ached for him. "I'm so sorry, Wesley. I know how much you love her." He nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "What do we do now?" I took his hand, squeezing it gently. "We face this together. We find out the truth, no matter how painful it might be." As we sat there, planning our next move, I realized we were at a crossroads. The path ahead would be difficult, fraught with emotional landmines and painful revelations. But for the first time since meeting Vivian, I felt hope. Wesley was choosing to see the truth, choosing us. Little did we know, Vivian was already planning her next move, one that would push us all to the breaking point. The tension between Wesley and me had been palpable since our confrontation about Vivian. We were treading on eggshells, both afraid to shatter the fragile peace we'd established. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. "We should go to Sterling's bar tonight," Wesley suggested one Friday evening. "It might help, to see them in a different setting." I hesitated but agreed. Maybe a neutral ground would provide some clarity. The bar was packed when we arrived, the air thick with laughter and the clinking of glasses. Sterling spotted us immediately, his megawatt smile on full display. "Wesley, Angela. What a surprise," he called out, ushering us to prime seats at the bar. "First rounds on the house." As Sterling mixed our drinks with a flourish, I couldn't help but notice how his eyes kept darting to the door. It wasn't until an hour later that I understood why. Vivian swept in, looking stunning in a form-fitting red dress. Her eyes locked onto Wesley, a possessive gleam in them that made my skin crawl. "Little brother," she cooed, embracing Wesley tightly. "And Angela, how lovely to see you both." The night progressed with an undercurrent of tension. Vivian monopolized Wesley's attention, while Sterling kept refilling my glass with a wink and a smile. Sterling said, leaning in close as Vivian dragged Wesley onto the dance floor. "You're not the first girlfriend of Wesley's to feel this way about Vivian." I stiffened. "What do you mean?" Sterling's eyes gleamed with something I couldn't quite place. Let's just say Vivian has a way of complicating things. For Wesley's own good, of course. Before I could press further, Sterling was called away to handle a rowdy group. I watched him go, my mind reeling with implications. As the night wore on, I found myself alone at the bar, Wesley still caught in Vivian's orbit on the dance floor. That's when Sterling made his move. "You're too good for this, you know," he said, sliding onto the stool next to me. His hand found my knee, squeezing gently. "If you were mine, I'd never let Vivian come between us." I jerked away, shocked. "What are you doing, Sterling?" He leaned in, his breath hot on my ear. "Just following the script, sweetheart. It's what Vivian wants." My blood ran cold. "What?" Sterling's eyes darted to where Vivian and Wesley were locked in an intimate conversation.
She always does this.
Pushes the girlfriends away. Keeps Wesley close. And me? I play my part. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Wesley's head snapped up, his eyes widening as he took in the scene. "Angela," he called out, pushing through the crowd. But I was already moving, desperate for air, for space to process Sterling's revelation. I burst out of the bar, gulping in the cool night air. Wesley caught up to me on the sidewalk. "What happened? Did Sterling say something?" I turned to face him, tears stinging my eyes. "It's all been a lie, Wesley. A manipulation." Sterling just admitted it. Wesley's face paled. "What are you talking about?" "Vivian," I choked out. "She's been orchestrating everything. The accidents, the tension, even Sterling's advances. It's all to keep you close and push everyone else away." Wesley shook his head, denial written across his features. "No, that's not possible. Vivian wouldn't." "Wouldn't what, little brother?" Vivian's voice cut through the night air like a knife. She stood in the bar's doorway, Sterling hovering behind her like a shadow. The moment stretched, taut with unspoken accusations and years of manipulation. Wesley looked between us, his world visibly crumbling around him. "Is it true?" he whispered, his voice breaking. Vivian's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing a desperation that chilled me to the bone. "Everything I've done has been for you, Wesley. To protect you." Wesley stumbled back as if physically struck. "Protect me?" "By sabotaging every relationship I've ever had." Vivian reached for him, but he flinched away. "You don't understand. After Mom and Dad, you're all I have. I couldn't lose you two." As the siblings faced off, years of unspoken resentments bubbling to the surface, I realized we had reached a turning point. The truth was out, ugly and raw. Now Wesley had to make a choice, the sister who had been his whole world, or the future we could build together. The night air crackled with tension as we all waited to see which way the scales would tip. The tension from that night outside Sterling's bar hung over us like a storm cloud for days. Wesley was a shell of himself, torn between the sister who raised him and the truth he could no longer ignore. I walked on eggshells, afraid that one wrong move might shatter our fragile relationship. It was Wesley who finally broke the silence. "We need to talk to Vivian," he said one morning, his voice heavy with resignation. "All of us. Together." I nodded, my heart racing at the thought of confronting Vivian directly. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Wesley's eyes met mine, a mix of determination and fear swirling in their depths. "I have to be. For us." The drive to Vivian's house was silent, the weight of what was to come pressing down on us both. As we pulled up, I noticed Sterling's car in the driveway. "Did you tell them we were coming?" I asked. Wesley shook his head.
No.
"But somehow, I'm not surprised they're both here." Vivian opened the door before we could knock, her smile brittle. "Wesley, Angela." What an unexpected surprise. We followed her into the living room, where Sterling lounged on the sofa, drink in hand. The air crackled with unspoken tension. "We need to talk," Wesley said, his voice steadier than I expected. "About everything." Vivian's facade cracked for just a moment before she composed herself. "Of course, little brother. What's on your mind?" For the next hour, everything came pouring out. The allergic reactions, the subtle manipulations, Sterling's advances, all of it laid bare. Vivian denied it at first, her voice rising in pitch as she protested her innocence. "How could you think I'd do such things?" she cried, tears welling in her eyes. "Everything I've done has been for you, Wesley." But as Wesley recounted incident after incident, years of coincidences that had driven wedges between him and every woman he'd cared for, Vivian's denials grew weaker. "You don't understand," she whispered, her mask finally crumbling. "After Mom and Dad died, you were all I had left. I couldn't bear the thought of losing you too." Wesley's voice shook as he replied, "So you decided to control every aspect of my life? To sabotage every relationship I've ever had?" Vivian collapsed onto the sofa, her body racked with sobs. "I was protecting you. Those women, they didn't understand you like I do. They would have hurt you, left you, like you're hurting me now." Wesley's words cut through the room like a knife. I watched as years of manipulation and codependency unraveled before my eyes. Sterling, silent until now, finally spoke up. "It's true, mate," he said, unable to meet Wesley's gaze. "All of it. Vivian. She orchestrated everything. The accidents, the misunderstandings, even my part in it all." Wesley stumbled back, as if physically struck. "How could you?" he whispered, his eyes locked on his sister. "How could you do this to me?" Vivian reached for him, desperation etched across her face. "Please, Wesley. You have to understand. I love you. Everything I did out of love." But Wesley recoiled from her touch. "This isn't love, Vivian. This is control. This is fear. And I can't live like this anymore." The room fell silent, save for Vivian's muffled sobs. I stood there, my heart breaking for Wesley even as relief flooded through me. The truth was finally out. Wesley turned to me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Angela, I'm so sorry. For everything. Can you ever forgive me for not seeing the truth sooner?" I took his hand, squeezing it gently. "There's nothing to forgive. We're in this together, remember?" He nodded, a small smile breaking through his pain. Then he turned back to Vivian, his voice firm despite the tremor in it. "I love you, Viv. You're my sister, and that will never change. But this, us, it has to change. I need space. Time to figure out who I am without your influence." Vivian's wail of anguish echoed through the house as Wesley led me towards the door. As we stepped outside, I could feel the shift in the air. A chapter was closing, but a new one filled with hope and the promise of a healthier future, was just beginning. Wesley took a deep breath, his hand still clasped tightly in mine. "Let's go home," he said softly. And as we drove away from the house that had held so many secrets, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. The months following our confrontation with Vivian were a whirlwind of emotion and change. Wesley and I grew closer, our bond strengthened by the trials we'd faced together. When he proposed on a crisp autumn evening, tears of joy streaming down his face, I knew we were ready to start our new life together. As our wedding day approached, a cautious optimism settled over us. Wesley had maintained minimal contact with Vivian, setting clear boundaries for the first time in his life. She hadn't taken it well, but we hoped time would heal the wounds. The morning of our wedding dawned bright and clear. I stood in the bridal suite, surrounded by my closest friends and my mother, all of us buzzing with excitement. "You look absolutely radiant, sweetheart," my mother said, tears glistening in her eyes as she adjusted my veil. I beamed at her, my heart full. "Thanks, Mom. I can't believe this day is finally here." Just then, my maid of honor burst into the room, her face pale. "Angela, we have a problem." My stomach dropped. "What is it?" She hesitated, wringing her hands. "It's your dress. Someone's destroyed it." The room erupted in gasps and exclamations. I felt the blood drain from my face as I rushed to the closet where my gown had been hanging. Sure enough, it was in tatters, slashed to ribbons. "Vivian," I whispered, a cold certainty settling over me. My mother wrapped her arm around me. "Oh, honey, what are we going to do?" For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm me. Then, a strange calm washed over me. I'd been preparing for this, hadn't I? Ever since that night at Sterling's bar, I'd known Vivian wouldn't go down without a fight. I turned to my stunned bridal party, a determined smile on my face. Ladies, remember that backup plan we talked about? Relief flooded their faces as understanding dawned. My maid of honor rushed to retrieve the garment bag we'd hidden away, just in case. As I slipped into the simple, elegant gown we'd chosen as a contingency, I felt a surge of pride. Vivian might have destroyed my original dress, but she couldn't touch what really mattered, the love Wesley and I shared. Meanwhile, in the groom's suite, chaos of a different kind was unfolding. Wesley paced anxiously, his best man watching with concern. "She's not coming, is she?" Wesley muttered, running a hand through his hair. "Vivian's done something, I know it." Just then, there was a commotion outside. The door burst open, revealing a disheveled Vivian. "Wesley, please," she pleaded, her eyes wild. "You can't go through with this. She's not right for you. Only I understand what you need." Wesley's face hardened. "Vivian, stop. This ends now." "What have you done?" Vivian's composure cracked. I only wanted to protect you. The dress. I thought if I could just delay things." Wesley's best man stepped between them. "I think you should leave, Vivian."
Now.
As security escorted a sobbing Vivian from the premises, Wesley turned to his best man, determination etched on his face. "Find Angela. Make sure she's okay. This wedding is happening no matter what." Back in the bridal suite, I stood before the mirror, taking in my reflection. The backup dress was simpler than my original gown, but as I gazed at myself, I realized it was perfect. It represented everything Wesley and I had been through: resilience, adaptability, and unwavering love. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. "Angela." Wesley's voice called out. "Are you okay? Can I come in?" I hesitated for just a moment before answering. "Yes, come in." Wesley entered, his eyes widening as he took in the sight of me. "Angela, you look breathtaking." I smiled, tears threatening to spill. "Vivian?" He shook his head.
Gone.
"It's just us now." Wesley crossed the room in 2 strides, taking my hands in his. "Angela, after everything we've been through, I want you to know, I choose you. Today and every day. No more doubts, no more interference. Just us." I squeezed his hands, my heart overflowing. "I choose you too, Wesley. Always." As we made our way to the ceremony, hand in hand, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Vivian's final attempt at sabotage had failed. Our love, tested by fire, had emerged stronger than ever. The wedding march began to play, and as we stepped into our future, I felt a sense of triumph. We had won, not just against Vivian, but against all the doubts and fears that had plagued us. This was our moment, our victory, and nothing could take it away from us. The first year of our marriage flew by in a blissful whirlwind. Wesley and I settled into our new home, relishing the peace that came with our hard-won freedom from Vivian's influence. We threw ourselves into building our life together, focusing on our careers and nurturing our relationship. It was on our first anniversary that the unexpected happened. A letter arrived, postmarked from a small town on the coast. I recognized Vivian's handwriting immediately. "Do you want me to read it?" Wesley asked, his voice tight with apprehension. I squeezed his hand. "Let's do it together." The letter was a revelation. Vivian wrote of her journey over the past year, the therapy she'd undergone, the painful self-reflection, and the realization of the damage she'd caused. She expressed deep remorse for her actions and a desire to make amends, if we were willing. "What do you think?" I asked Wesley, watching emotions play across his face. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know. Part of me wants to believe her, but after everything..." I nodded, understanding his hesitation. "Maybe we could start small. A phone call, perhaps?" That phone call led to more conversations, each one a careful dance of boundaries and tentative trust. Vivian had indeed changed. She'd broken things off with Sterling, recognizing the toxicity of their relationship. She'd moved to the coast, starting fresh in a new town where she could focus on her own growth. Months passed, and slowly, cautiously, we allowed Vivian back into our lives. It wasn't easy. There were moments of tension, old habits threatening to resurface. But Vivian was committed to change, and we were committed to giving her a chance. The true test came when we announced we were expecting our first child. I held my breath, waiting for Vivian's reaction. To my surprise, tears of joy filled her eyes. "I'm so happy for you both," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And I promise I'll be the best aunt I can be, without overstepping." As my due date approached, Vivian proved true to her word. She offered support without smothering, respecting our boundaries at every turn. When our daughter, Lily, was born, Vivian was there, but she waited patiently in the waiting room until we were ready for visitors. Watching her hold Lily for the first time, I saw a transformation in Vivian. The possessiveness that had once consumed her was gone, replaced by a gentle, nurturing love. "She's perfect," Vivian whispered, gazing down at her niece. "You two have created something beautiful." Wesley wrapped his arm around me, his eyes misty. "We all have," he said, including Vivian in the moment. "Our family." As we settled into life with Lily, I marveled at how far we'd come. The journey hadn't been easy, but the rewards were beyond anything I could have imagined. Wesley and I had not only strengthened our bond, but had also helped Vivian find her way to a healthier, more fulfilling life. One evening, as we sat on our porch watching the sunset, Lily cooing softly in my arms, Wesley turned to me with a smile. "You know," he said, "that first night we met, I told you that you were dangerous. I had no idea how right I was." I laughed softly. "Oh, and how exactly was I dangerous?" His eyes softened as he gazed at me. "You were dangerous because you had the power to change everything. My life, Vivian's life, our entire family dynamic. You showed us all what real love looks like, the kind that's strong enough to overcome any obstacle, yet gentle enough to allow for growth and forgiveness." Tears pricked my eyes as I leaned into him. "We did it together," I murmured. As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant hues, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. We had faced manipulation, betrayal, and near destruction of our relationship. But through it all, our love had not only survived but flourished. Looking at our daughter, at my husband, and thinking of the renewed relationship with Vivian, I knew that this beautiful, imperfect, hard-won family was the greatest victory of all. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but as I sat there, surrounded by love, I knew that every step had been worth it. We had not just survived, we had thrived. And the future, once so uncertain, now stretched before us, bright with promise and possibility. My name is Cassandra Harper, but everyone calls me Cassie. I'm a 38-year-old single mom and nurse, and I thought I'd seen it all. But nothing could have prepared me for what I found when I walked into my daughter's room that evening. "Lydia?" I called out, pushing open her door. "Honey, I'm home. How was your day with?" The words died in my throat. My vibrant, curly-haired 15-year-old sat on her bed, tears streaming down her face.
But it wasn't her tears that shocked me.
It was her hair, or rather, the complete lack of it. "Oh my God," I whispered, rushing to her side. "Lydia, what happened?" She looked up at me, her eyes red and puffy. "Grandma Evelyn," she choked out. She said I was turning into a delinquent." My blood ran cold. "Evelyn did this to you?" Lydia nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I pulled her into my arms, my mind reeling. How could Evelyn, my ex-mother-in-law, do something so cruel? She said my hair was a distraction. Lydia sobbed into my shoulder. That I was spending too much time on it instead of studying. She just grabbed the clippers and I held her tighter, fury building inside me. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry." As I comforted my daughter, my phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. "I've taken care of Lydia's little rebellion. You can thank me later." I nearly threw the phone across the room. Instead, I took a deep breath and turned back to Lydia. "We're going to fix this, okay?" I promise. A knock at the front door interrupted us. I kissed Lydia's forehead and went to answer it, finding our neighbor, Grant, on the other side. "Hey, Cassie," he said with a smile that quickly faded when he saw my face. "What's wrong?" I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. "It's Lydia. Evelyn." She shaved her head. Grant's eyes widened.
What?
"Why would she do that?" "Because she's a controlling monster." I spat, then immediately felt guilty. "I'm sorry, No, don't apologize," Grant said, placing a comforting hand on my arm. "That's awful. Is there anything I can do?" I shook my head, fighting back tears of my own. "I don't know. I don't even know where to start." "Mom," Lydia's voice called from her room. "Can you come back?" "I should go," I told Grant. "Thank you for checking in." He nodded, concern etched on his face. "I'm here if you need anything, okay?" As I closed the door behind him, my phone buzzed again. This time it was my best friend and coworker, Rosa. "Girl, you will not believe the day I had." Her text read, "Drinks tonight?" I typed back quickly, "Can't. Family emergency." Evelyn shaved Lydia's head. Rosa's response was immediate. "What?" "I'm coming over." I returned to Lydia's room, finding her examining her reflection in a small mirror. "How could she do this, Mom?" she asked, her voice small and broken. I sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "I don't know, sweetie, but we're going to get through this together, okay?" Lydia leaned into me, nodding slightly. "What are we going to do?" I took a deep breath, my mind racing. How could I protect my daughter from Evelyn's toxic influence when I relied on her for childcare during my long hospital shifts? How could I confront the woman who had been my only support since Eli left? "First," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt, "we're going to find you the coolest hats and scarves in town. And then we're going to have a long talk with Grandma Evelyn." As I held my daughter close, I knew one thing for certain. Things were about to change in the Harper household. And Evelyn had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I stood outside Evelyn's pristine Victorian house, my hands shaking with a mix of rage and anxiety. I'd left Lydia with Rosa, unable to face the thought of bringing her here. Taking a deep breath, I rang the doorbell. Evelyn answered with a smile that quickly faded when she saw my face. "Cassandra, dear, what brings you here so early?" I pushed past her into the foyer. "We need to talk about what you did to Lydia." Evelyn's expression hardened. "I assume you're referring to her haircut." "Really, Cassandra, you should be thanking me." "Thanking you?" I spat. "You shaved my daughter's head without her consent." "She needed discipline," Evelyn said, her voice cold. "That girl was becoming unmanageable. Always primping, never studying. I did what needed to be done." I clenched my fists, struggling to maintain composure. "You had no right. Lydia is my daughter, not your personal project." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Someone needs to instill proper values in that child. Lord knows you're too busy working to do it yourself."
Her words hit like a slap.
I'd relied on Evelyn for childcare during my long hospital shifts, but at what cost? "Lydia is a wonderful, creative girl," I said, my voice shaking. "She doesn't need to be fixed or controlled. She needs love and support." "Love," Evelyn scoffed. "Love without discipline is what ruins children. Look at what happened with Eli." The mention of my ex-husband sent a jolt through me. "Don't you dare bring Eli into this." "Why not? He's the perfect example of what happens when you let a child run wild. Now he's God knows where, abandoning his responsibilities." I took a step closer to Evelyn, my anger boiling over. "You drove Eli away with your controlling behavior, just like you're trying to do with Lydia. But I won't let you. This ends now." Evelyn's facade cracked for a moment, revealing a flicker of fear. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that you will no longer have unsupervised time with Lydia. If you want to see her, it will be on my terms." "You can't do that," Evelyn hissed. "You need me. Who else will watch Lydia while you're working those ridiculous shifts?" I faltered for a moment, the reality of my situation hitting home. How could I manage without Evelyn's help? As if sensing my doubt, Evelyn pressed on. "Face it, Cassandra. You're in over your head. Lydia needs a firm hand, and I'm the only one willing to provide it. I stood there, torn between my need for childcare and my desire to protect Lydia from Evelyn's toxic influence. The weight of single motherhood pressed down on me, threatening to crush my resolve. But then I thought of Lydia's tear-stained face, her beautiful curls reduced to stubble. I couldn't let this continue. "No," I said, my voice stronger now. "I'll figure something out. But you will not treat Lydia like this ever again." Evelyn's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake, Cassandra. That girl needs guidance, structure. Without it, she'll end up just like her father." "If by that you mean free from your control, then good," I shot back. "Lydia deserves better than this. We both do." As I turned to leave, Evelyn called after me. "You'll be back, Cassandra. You can't do this alone." I paused at the door, looking back at the woman who had been both my support and my tormentor for so long. "Watch me," I said and walked out. As I drove home, my mind raced. How would I manage work and childcare without Evelyn? But beneath the worry, a sense of relief washed over me. For the first time in years, I felt like I was truly standing up for myself and my daughter. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew one thing for certain: Lydia and I would face them together, free from Evelyn's suffocating influence. It was time to reclaim our lives and forge our own path. That night, after tucking Lydia into bed, I found myself staring at an old photo album. My fingers traced the outline of a smiling couple, Eli and me on our wedding day. Evelyn's words echoed in my mind. "Look at what happened with Eli." I hadn't thought about my ex-husband in months, but now memories flooded back. Eli, always trying to please his mother, always falling short. The arguments, the tension, the feeling of walking on eggshells in our own home. And then one day, he was just
Gone.
A knock at the door startled me from my reverie. I opened it to find Rosa, arms laden with takeout bags. "Thought you could use some comfort food," she said, pushing past me into the kitchen. I smiled gratefully. "You're a lifesaver." As we settled on the couch with our food, Rosa fixed me with a serious look.
Spilit, chica.
What happened with the Wicked Witch? I recounted my confrontation with Evelyn, ending with my declaration of independence. Rosa hooped, nearly spilling her drink. "About time," she exclaimed. "But wait, how are you going to manage without her help?" I sighed, picking at my food. "I have no idea, but I can't let her keep controlling us like this." Rosa nodded, her expression softening. "You know, this reminds me of what happened with Eli." I tensed. "How so?" "Remember how he was always trying to please Evelyn? How she'd criticize everything he did?" Rosa paused, choosing her words carefully. "And then one day, he just couldn't take it anymore." I felt a lump forming in my throat. "He left us, Rosa. He abandoned his family." "I know, honey. And that was wrong. But can you blame him for wanting to escape Evelyn's control?" Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Had I been so focused on Eli's abandonment that I'd missed the bigger picture? I never thought of it that way, I admitted. Rosa squeezed my hand. "Maybe it's time to start looking at things differently. For Lydia's sake and your own." As if on cue, there was another knock at the door. This time it was Grant, looking sheepish. "Sorry to bother you," he said, "but I noticed your porch light was flickering. Thought I could take a look if you want." I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. As Grant worked on the light fixture, I found myself opening up about the situation with Evelyn and Lydia. "That's rough," Grant said, his voice muffled as he fiddled with the wiring. "But you're doing the right thing, standing up for your daughter." "Thanks," I said, surprised by how much his support meant to me. "I just wish I knew what to do next." Grant emerged from behind the light, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Well, for starters, you've got friends who care about you. And if you need help with Lydia while you're at work, I'd be happy to pitch in." I blinked, touched by his offer. "Really? You'd do that?" He shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. "What are neighbors for?" As Grant left, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Maybe I wasn't as alone in this as I thought. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I found myself thinking about Eli again. Not with anger or resentment, but with a new understanding. He had been Evelyn's first victim, in a way. And while it didn't excuse his actions, it helped me see the situation more clearly. I made a silent promise to myself and to Lydia. We would break this cycle of control and manipulation. We would forge our own path, surrounded by people who truly cared for us. And maybe, just maybe, we'd find a way to heal the wounds of the past, not just for ourselves, but for our whole fractured family. The next few days were a whirlwind of work shifts and juggling Lydia's care between Rosa and Grant. But as the dust settled, I found myself drawn to the attic, where boxes of old family mementos lay forgotten. I pulled down a dusty trunk, coughing as I pried it open. Inside, I found a treasure trove of old photos, letters, and journals. As I sifted through them, a pattern began to emerge, one that made my blood run cold. There were photos of Evelyn with a young woman I'd never seen before, their smiles bright and carefree. But as I flipped through the album, the woman's presence dwindled until she disappeared entirely. A yellowed envelope caught my eye. Inside was a letter, dated nearly 40 years ago. Dearest Evelyn, I can't take it anymore. Your constant criticism, your need to control every aspect of my life, it's suffocating me. I'm leaving, and I beg you not to try to find me. Please, for once, respect my decision. Your sister, Mabel. My hands shook as I read the words. Evelyn had a sister? One she'd driven away with the same controlling behavior she'd used on Eli, on me, on Lydia? I dove deeper into the trunk, uncovering more evidence of Evelyn's manipulative past. There were angry letters from old friends, journal entries detailing her obsession with molding others to her will, even a newspaper clipping about a family feud that had torn the Harpers apart decades ago. As I pieced together this hidden history, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Is this Cassandra Harper? My name is Mabel Thornton. I believe we need to talk about my sister, Evelyn. My heart raced as I quickly replied, setting up a video call for that evening. When Mabel's face appeared on my screen, I was struck by how much she resembled Evelyn, but her eyes were kinder, her smile genuine. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me, Mabel said, her voice warm. I've been following the Harper family from afar for years, and when I heard about what happened to your daughter, well, I knew it was time to reach out. I leaned in, hungry for answers. Mabel, I had no idea Evelyn even had a sister. What happened between you two? Mabel's expression darkened. Evelyn wasn't always like this, you know. But our mother was a harsh woman, always pushing us to be perfect. Evelyn, she internalized that pressure, started trying to control everything and everyone around her. As Mabel shared story after story of Evelyn's controlling behavior, I felt a mix of validation and horror. It was like looking at a blueprint for my own experiences with my ex-mother-in-law. I tried to stand up to her, Mabel continued, but it only made things worse. In the end, leaving was the only way I could breathe. But why are you reaching out now? I asked. Mabel's eyes filled with tears. Because I see history repeating itself. I couldn't save Evelyn from becoming our mother, but maybe I can help you protect Lydia from the same fate. We talked for hours, Mabel providing insight into Evelyn's psyche that I'd never had before. As we said our goodbyes, promising to stay in touch, I felt a strange mix of emotions: anger at Evelyn's actions, sympathy for the damaged woman behind them, and a fierce determination to break this cycle once and for all. The next morning, I sat Lydia down at the breakfast table. Honey, there's something I need to tell you about Grandma Evelyn. As I shared what I'd learned, careful to present the facts without coloring them with my own emotions, I watched Lydia's face. She moved from shock to anger to a thoughtful frown. So, what do we do now, Mom? She asked finally. I took a deep breath. I'm not sure yet, but whatever we decide, we'll do it together. No more secrets, no more letting Evelyn call all the shots. It's time we took control of our own story. Lydia nodded, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. In that moment, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them as a team, stronger and wiser than ever before. As the days passed, I watched Lydia with a mixture of pride and concern. The initial shock of her shaved head had worn off, replaced by a fierce determination I'd never seen in her before. One morning, I found her standing in front of the mirror, running her hand over her stubbly scalp. "You know what, Mom?" she said, catching my eye in the reflection. "I think I'm going to keep it short. It feels powerful." I smiled, my heart swelling. "It suits you, sweetheart. You look strong." Lydia turned to face me, her expression serious. "I feel strong. Like I'm finally becoming who I'm supposed to be, not who Grandma Evelyn wants me to be." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. My daughter was finding her strength, but at what cost? The urge to protect her ward with a newfound respect for her resilience. Later that day, as I was leaving work, Rosa caught up with me in the parking lot. "Hey, Chica. How are you holding up?" I sighed, leaning against my car. "Honestly, I'm not sure. Lydia's doing better than I expected, but I can't shake this anger towards Evelyn." Rosa nodded, her eyes sympathetic. "Have you thought about what you're going to do?" The question had been haunting me for days. Part of me wants to expose Evelyn's past to everyone. Let the whole community see what she's really like. But, Rosa prompted, "But I don't know if that's the right thing to do. Would I be any better than her if I used her secrets as a weapon?" Rosa squeezed my arm. "Only you can decide that, Cassie. But remember, whatever you choose, you're not alone in this." Her words stayed with me as I drove home, my mind churning with possibilities. When I arrived, I found Gran on my porch, toolbox in hand. "Hey," he said, looking slightly embarrassed. "I noticed your gutters were clogged. Thought I'd take care of it for you." I felt the rush of warmth at his thoughtfulness. "Grant, you don't have to dash." He held up a hand, smiling. "I want to. It's what neighbors do, right?" As he worked, we chatted about Lydia's progress and my dilemma with Evelyn. Grant listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration. "You know," he said finally, climbing down from the ladder, "my old man used to say that the best revenge is living well. Maybe instead of exposing Evelyn, you focus on building the life you and Lydia deserve." His words resonated with me, offering a perspective I hadn't considered. As we said goodbye, I felt a spark of something new, not just gratitude, but a deeper connection I wasn't quite ready to name. That night, as Lydia and I sat down for dinner, I broached the subject that had been weighing on me. "Honey, I've been thinking about Grandma Evelyn and everything that's happened." I began cautiously. Lydia looked up, her expression guarded. "What about her?" I took a deep breath. I'm torn between wanting to expose her behavior to everyone and trying to find a way to move forward without stooping to her level. "What do you think?" Lydia was quiet for a moment, pushing her food around her plate. "I'm angry at her, Mom. Really angry. But I don't think hurting her back will make things better." Her maturity stunned me. "You're right," I said softly. "So, what do we do?" Lydia's eyes met mine, filled with a wisdom beyond her years. "We live our lives. We be happy. We show her that she can't control us anymore." In that moment, looking at my brave, resilient daughter, I knew what I had to do. We wouldn't seek revenge, but we wouldn't let Evelyn's toxic influence continue either. We'd set boundaries, stand our ground, and build the life we deserved, together. As we cleared the table, a plan began to form in my mind. It wouldn't be easy, but with Lydia by my side and the support of friends like Rosa and Grant, I felt ready to face whatever came next. The turning point had arrived. It was time to rewrite our story, on our own terms. The day of the family gathering arrived, and I felt my stomach churn with anxiety. Our living room was set up for an intervention of sorts, with chairs arranged in a circle. Lydia stood by my side, her newly buzzed head held high, radiating a quiet strength. As the doorbell rang, I squeezed her hand. "Ready?" She nodded. "Let's do this, Mom." One by one, our relatives filed in. Aunt Susan, Uncle George, cousins I hadn't seen in years. Their eyes widened at Lydia's appearance, but to their credit, they said nothing. And then, there was Evelyn, her face a mask of polite confusion. "Cassandra, what's all this about?" she asked, her voice sickly sweet. Before I could answer, the final guest arrived. Mabel stepped into the room, and the air seemed to crackle with tension. Evelyn's face drained of color. "Mabel," she whispered, What are you doing here? I cleared my throat. Please, everyone, have a seat. We have a lot to discuss. As everyone settled, I took a deep breath and began. I've called you all here because it's time we address the elephant in the room. The manipulation, the control, the damage that's been done to this family for generations. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. I don't know what you're talking about, don't you? Mabel's voice was quiet but firm. Sister, it's time to face the truth. Over the next hour, the floodgates opened. Mabel shared stories of Evelyn's controlling behavior from their childhood. Aunt Susan tearfully recounted how Evelyn had driven a wedge between her and her husband. Even Uncle George, usually so stoic, spoke of the constant criticism he'd endured. Through it all, Evelyn sat rigid, her face a storm of emotions. When Lydia stood to speak, the room fell silent. Grandma, she said, her voice trembling slightly, I know you think you're helping us, but can't you see how much you're hurting everyone? How much you hurt me? Evelyn's facade finally cracked. I never meant to hurt anyone, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I just wanted everyone to be their best, to be perfect. But at what cost? I asked, my own voice thick with emotion. You drove Eli away. You nearly destroyed Lydia's self-esteem. When will it be enough? The room was heavy with unspoken pain and long-buried resentments. But as I looked around at my family, I saw something else too, a glimmer of hope, a chance for healing. Evelyn's shoulders sagged, the fight seeming to leave her. I don't know how to be any different, she admitted, her voice small and broken. It was Mabel who moved first, crossing the room to kneel beside her sister. It's not too late to learn, she said gently. We can help you if you'll let us. I watched as years of tension seemed to dissolve between the sisters. Evelyn reached out tentatively, grasping Mabel's hand like a lifeline. Turning to me, her eyes brimming with tears, Evelyn spoke. Cassandra, Lydia, can you ever forgive me? The room held its breath, waiting for my response. I felt the weight of generations on my shoulders, the cycle of hurt and control that had defined our family for so long. In that moment, I knew I had a choice, to perpetuate the cycle or to break it once and for all. I looked at Lydia, seeing in her eyes the same decision being made. Together, we stepped forward. It won't be easy, I said, my voice steady. There's a lot of hurt to work through, but if you're willing to try to really change, then yes, we can work on forgiveness. Lydia nodded, adding, but things have to be different, Grandma. No more controlling, no more criticism. We need to build something new. As Evelyn nodded, tears streaming down her face, I felt a shift in the room. It was as if a great weight had been lifted, allowing us all to breathe freely for the first time in years. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but as I looked around at my family, broken, healing, but together, I knew we had taken the first step towards something better. The masks had fallen, the truth was out, and now, finally, we could begin to rebuild. The days following the family gathering were a whirlwind of emotions. I found myself oscillating between hope for a new beginning and the lingering anger from years of hurt. Lydia, ever perceptive, noticed my internal struggle. Mom, she said one evening as we sat on the porch swing, what are we going to do about Grandma Evelyn? I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I don't know, sweetie. Part of me wants to cut her out of our lives completely. Lydia was quiet for a moment, then said, but that's not really what you want, is it? Her words hit me like a thunderbolt. She was right. As much as Evelyn had hurt us, the thought of severing ties completely felt wrong. I realized then that revenge, in any form, wouldn't heal our wounds. It would only create new ones. The next day, I called a family meeting. Lydia, Evelyn, and I sat around our kitchen table, the tension palpable. I've been doing a lot of thinking, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. And I've realized something important. We can't change the past, but we can choose how we move forward. Evelyn's eyes widened, a flicker of hope crossing her face. What are you saying, Cassandra? I took a deep breath. I'm saying that I want to give you a chance to make amends. Not just for Lydia's sake, but for all of us. The room fell silent. Lydia looked at me, surprise and admiration in her eyes. Evelyn seemed to be holding her breath. But I continued, my voice firm. It won't be easy. We need to set clear boundaries. And I think we all need to start therapy. Together and separately. Evelyn's lip trembled. You do that? Give me another chance. We would. Lydia chimed in, her voice strong. But things have to change, Grandma. Really change. To my surprise, Evelyn nodded vigorously. Yes, of course. I'll do anything. I don't want to lose you both. As we hashed out the details, weekly family therapy sessions, clear rules about respect and personal boundaries, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. This wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about choosing a different future. Later that evening, as I recounted the conversation to Rosa over the phone, she let out a low whistle.
Wow, chica.
That's not what I expected. Are you sure about this? I glanced out the window, where Lydia and Evelyn were tentatively working together in the garden, planting new flowers. I'm sure it won't be easy. But yes, I think this is the right path. You're a stronger woman than me, Rosa said, admiration in her voice. But I'm proud of you, Cassie. This takes real courage. As I hung up, a knock at the door startled me. It was Grant, a concerned look on his face. Hey, I saw Evelyn's car. Everything okay? I smiled, touched by his concern. Actually, yeah, we're working on it. I filled him in on our decision, watching his expression change from worry to amazement. Cassie, that's incredible. You're giving your family a real shot at healing. His words warmed me, and I felt a flutter in my chest that had nothing to do with family drama. Thank you, Grant, for everything. Your support has meant more than you know. He smiled, his eyes soft. Anytime, Cassie. I'm here, whatever you need. As he left, I turned back to watch Lydia and Evelyn in the garden. They were laughing at something, the sound carrying through the open window. It was a small moment, but it felt like the first ray of sunlight after a long storm. I knew the road ahead would be challenging. There would be setbacks, old hurts resurfacing, new boundaries to navigate. But watching my daughter and her grandmother tentatively rebuilding their relationship, I felt a surge of hope. This was our chance to break the cycle of hurt and control that had defined our family for generations. It wouldn't be easy, but as I stood there, watching the two most important women in my life begin to heal, I knew it would be worth it. The path of forgiveness and growth stretched out before us, uncertain but full of possibility. And for the first time in years, I felt truly ready to face whatever came next, not alone, but as a family, flawed but healing, together. 6 months had passed since our family's confrontation, and the change was palpable. Lydia's hair had grown into a stylish pixie cut, a physical manifestation of her newfound confidence. As I watched her laughing with her friends in our backyard, I marveled at her resilience. She's flourishing, Evelyn said softly, joining me at the window. Our relationship was still a work in progress, but the weekly therapy sessions had made a world of difference. I nodded, smiling. She really is. And so are you, Evelyn. Evelyn's eyes misted over. I never thought I could change, Cassandra. Thank you for giving me the chance. Our moment was interrupted by the doorbell. It was Grant, toolbox in hand as usual. Hey, Cassie. Just want to check if that leaky faucet is still giving you trouble. I felt a familiar flutter in my chest. Actually, I think I've got it under control. But would you like to stay for dinner? His smile lit up his face. I'd love to. As we all gathered around the dinner table, Lydia, Evelyn, Grant, and me, I was struck by how far we'd come. The tension that once defined our family dinners had been replaced by genuine warmth and laughter. Lydia regaled us with stories from her art class, where she'd started a project inspired by our family's journey. I'm calling it Roots and Wings, she explained. It's about how our past shapes us, but doesn't have to define us. Evelyn reached out, gently squeezing Lydia's hand. That's beautiful, dear. I can't wait to see it. After dinner, as Grant and I cleaned up, he turned to me with a serious expression. Cassie, I've been meaning to ask you something. My heart raced. Yes. Would you like to go out sometime? Just the two of us. I felt a smile spread across my face. I'd love that, Grant. Later that evening, as I sat on the porch swing, I reflected on the whirlwind of the past few months. Our story had spread through the community, inspiring others to confront their own family issues. I'd even started a support group for people dealing with toxic family dynamics. Lydia joined me, resting her head on my shoulder. Mom, do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd chosen revenge instead of forgiveness? I wrapped an arm around her. Sometimes, but I think we made the right choice. Revenge might have felt good for a moment, but this feels like healing. I'm proud of us, Lydia said softly. And I'm proud of Grandma too. She's really trying. I kissed the top of her head. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Evelyn. Thank you for today. For everything. I love you both. Tears pricked my eyes as I showed the message to Lydia. We'd come so far from that devastating day when I'd found her with her head shaved. The road hadn't been easy, and there were still challenges ahead, but we were facing them together. I thought about Eli, wondering if he'd ever know how much we'd grown in his absence. Part of me hoped he'd find his way back to us someday, but I knew now that our happiness didn't depend on his return. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over our neighborhood, I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. We had broken the cycle of hurt and control that had defined our family for generations. In its place, we'd built something new, a foundation of love, respect, and understanding. I looked at Lydia, her face serene in the fading light, and felt a surge of pride and love. We'd weathered the storm together, emerging stronger and more united than ever before. Whatever the future held, new challenges, deepening relationships, unexpected twists and turns, I knew we were ready to face it. Not as perfect people, but as a family committed to growth, forgiveness, and unconditional love. As the first stars appeared in the twilight sky, I made a silent promise to myself and to Lydia. We would continue to nurture these new beginnings, to cherish the hard-won peace we'd found, and to always choose love over resentment. In the end, that was the greatest revenge of all, not just surviving, but thriving, and creating a legacy of healing that would ripple out far beyond our little family. It was a new chapter, full of hope and possibility, and I couldn't wait to see where it would lead us.